So you're looking for the best OLED gaming monitor on the market today? Well, you've come to the right place because the MSI MPG 271QR X50 might just be it. We're talking about a 27-inch monitor with the latest generation QD OLED panel, which means you're getting a higher brightness thanks to the HDR True Black 500 certification, and it's also going to be running at 500 frames per second at 1440p, of course. Now, also, unlike the cheaper counterpart that I reviewed not that long ago, which is also a great monitor, well, this one, it doesn't come with DisplayPort 1.4. No, it comes with the full-fat, full-bandwidth DisplayPort 2.1 on top of HDMI 2.1, which means you are not going to have to use display stream compression. So for those of you out there who have issues with DSC on your GPU, it's time to rejoice. We're talking about what could be the holy grail for online competitive gaming, and coming in at a allegedly around $799 price point, as apparently MSI hasn't fully decided yet. Well, it's not that much more expensive than the DisplayPort 1.4 version, which I'm seeing for around $750, only $50 more. But, you know, as great as this looks on paper, is it actually that good? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's to go ahead and test it. Now, if you don't know me, I'm the display guy. I review everything from monitors to TVs to even VR. If that sounds interesting, get subscribed, but enough already. Let's jump into it. Oh, and this monitor was lent to me by MSI, so that means I gotta send it back, and it won't be changing my opinion. So what should you expect out of this monitor? Well, you should expect, especially if you're coming from an LCD, a massive jump in overall image quality, especially in terms of speed. And I'm not just talking about latency, I'm more so talking about how responsive the panel itself is, meaning things in motion will be extremely fast, and it's also gonna have extremely good contrast thanks to it being a QD OLED panel, at least in a darkroom. We'll get into that. But what we're talking about here is essentially, at least for a 1440p panel, this is gonna be about as good as it gets. But now let's talk about the specific performance characteristics, starting off with the color. And because it is QD OLED, well, the color, at least again in a darkroom, is going to be insanely good. And let's jump into the actual data to go ahead and prove it. Now, I am part of Portrait Display Calman's reviewer program, so links in the description for that, but let's take a look. So out of the box, you can see in terms of the SDR accuracy, well, while the EOTF tracking is pretty good for the most part, the color is a bit off, as it is gonna ship in a mode that's not ideal for SDR out of the box. Now, you can quickly adjust this, and I will have the best settings for this display linked in my Patreon in the description below, which also gets you access to the Discord, where you can talk to me directly and greatly supports my future endeavors. Thank you to everyone who does that. But once we do those adjustments, well, you do still get that really good EOTF tracking. And in fact, I'm not even seeing any shadow crush anymore, which is really, really good for a monitor like this. And the overall color is looking good. However, there is a bit too much red, it looks like, when you get to brighter white elements. Now, in terms of the SDR color checker results, I am seeing very, very good results here with an average delta E of just 1.5, below the typically visible 2.0 human threshold. Now, for HDR, it is a little bit worse. Now, I will tell you, in terms of near black, it does very, very well, which is actually quite shocking. But whether you use the 500 True Black, the Peak 1000, or even the new EOTF boost mode, well, they all are going to have their own issues and won't perfectly track the EOTF curve, meaning that certain elements might be brighter or darker than they should be in HDR content. Now, as for the color checker results in HDR, once again, MSI is delivering far better results than I've seen out of, honestly, a lot of monitors on the market today. Now, for the HDR BT 2020 color gamut coverage, we are seeing around 80% in UV terms, which is excellent for a monitor like this. And the TLDR here is the colors in general are going to look exceedingly vibrant and great, but also in terms of the accuracy, both for SDR as well as HDR, MSI is delivering far above average in these categories, meaning that the creator's intent, whether it's gaming or watching movies, is going to be, for the most part, very well reproduced on this monitor. And for a gaming monitor, that is shockingly good news and something I don't always see. So great job there, MSI. But what about the brightness? Because this can also be an issue sometimes. And I will tell you guys, if you're expecting a super bright panel, Well, look, it is going to be a bit brighter thanks to the HDR 500 True Black instead of the older 400 True Black on other monitors, but it's not going to blow you away. And if you compare it to something like this TV behind me, the LG G5, well, this thing's going to wipe the floor with any monitors today, including this one. But let's take a look at the results. So you can see here in the peak window brightness at the D65 white point that the MSI MPG 271QR X50 comes in pretty much right next to its cheaper counterpart and is closer to the lower half of the brightness chart. And while it is doing better than older QD OLED panels, it's actually not that much brighter in general. But what about real HDR content? And the same thing happens here. Sure, it's doing better than older panels, but it's really not that much better, and it is around the middle of the pack, getting absolutely destroyed by something like a TV. So what I'm telling you is, yes, HDR, it's gonna be great on this monitor. You're gonna get better colors, you're gonna get higher brightness, and you're gonna get a wider dynamic range in general, leading to a far better and deeper looking image. But it's not gonna compare to much brighter OLED TVs or even mini LED panels. If you're after brightness, you'll have to look into one of those. But what about the contrast? Now, as for QD OLED in general, in a darkroom, the contrast is going to be infinite, and something like an LCD or mini LED is going to be nowhere near the performance of this panel. But introduce some lights and things are definitely going to change. I mean, take a look here at this ambient light handling chart. Here is an example of a 27-inch QD OLED, and you should expect similar results out of this model as well, meaning that, yeah, if you turn on the lights, the thing is going to turn magenta, it's going to lose a ton of contrast, and shadow detail can start to disappear. So if you are in a room with a window that you're going to have light pouring in from, whether you're going with a glossy screen, a matte screen, it doesn't matter. And by the way, this one is glossy, thank God. Well, it doesn't matter what this screen coating is ultimately, as QD OLED is going to have the same issue of turning magenta. And yes, this is going to mean that you'll probably be better off with something like a WOLED or mini LED in brighter environments. So just keep that in mind. However, let's talk about gaming now, because this is probably the main reason you're looking at this monitor. And it's a great reason, because gaming on this thing was absolutely insane. It's super responsive. It's insanely fast in motion. And it's one of the best experiences I've had playing a game online. I mean, let's take a look specifically at the latency. You can see here that technically this is now the fastest gaming monitor I have ever measured to date. And I've measured a lot of monitors. These are only the 1440p ones you're looking at right now, and these are typically the fastest ones that I review. So really, really impressive there. But even more impressively, take a look at the motion performance of a 500 Hz QD OLED. I mean, compare this to the example image on the left, and it's almost 1-to-1. Sure, it's not perfect, but it is so close that most objects in motion will look absolutely crystal clear. And when you compare it to something like a 240 Hz QD OLED, it's certainly more clear. And a mini LED all the way on the right, it is a night and day difference. Absolutely insane. And to make it better, well, it also comes with a ton of features, such as their new AI sensor for real human detection, meaning you can walk away and the screen will turn off and on. And of course, for gaming, you do have a ton of features, including crosshairs, shrinking the screen, etc. So there's a load of features in this monitor that you may be interested in. And again, for only $50 more than the non-DisplayPort 2.1 alternative from MSI, I do feel like this one's offering a ton of value with all these features. Pause if you need to, because there are a lot of them. Now, let's move on to the actual text clarity and subpixel layout. Look, this is a QD OLED, so it's going to have a triangular layout for the subpixels, which means that text is, well, it's going to look okay. Now, for the 4K monitors, there's so many more pixels that you often don't see these issues, but at 1440p, yes, QD OLED text, it looks a bit rough. I'm not gonna lie to you. It is gonna have noticeable fringing of green and magenta. Now, there are certain programs you can try to reduce this with, but it will always be somewhat of a problem. Now, as for the overall clarity, despite the fact that text can be a bit rough at times, depending on what it is, I think you'll be absolutely shocked in a good way with how clear this monitor looks. Yes, the 4K versions will look better. However, compared to a 1440p LCD, I think at least the clarity is way better, because those LCDs often come, in fact, they almost always come with a matte coating. This one has a glossy coating, which means there's a huge, and I mean huge, bump in the clarity. And this alone, if you're on an older LCD, is a big enough reason to upgrade in itself. I mean, let alone how much better contrast and speed OLED gives you, and the 500 Hz. If it was a 120 hertz LCD versus a 120 hertz OLED, I'd be like, jump on the QD OLED because it has a glossy screen. It is going to be a massive upgrade. Trust me, it is going to look so much more clear. You are not going to believe it, and you'll never want to go back to a matte coating ever again. It's insanely good. The only downside is, yes, you will have crisp reflections rather than diffused ones. Is that worse? I would say no, but some people think it is. Now, as for the viewing angles and uniformity, it's a QD OLED, and I'll tell you this, it's pretty much perfect, so let's move on. Does it have any issues? No. Also, the menu in the firmware was great, so let's go ahead and talk about what I think about this monitor as a whole and who should be purchasing it. So, the MSI MPG 271QR X50, got it in one go. Well, this thing, it has great accuracy, great speed, great motion, great color, and excellent contrast and clarity as well that will blow most monitors on the market absolutely out of the water. Now, it does have some small issues with white balance, poor ambient light handling, and mediocre brightness for HDR, but as a whole, this thing is definitely one of, if not the best gaming monitors that you can buy today. And that's saying a lot, because fellas, I have reviewed a lot of monitors, but when it comes to the overall image quality and speed of this display, it's just incredible. It's unbeatable in my opinion for now, and the extra accuracy was a great surprise. So yes, I'm gonna give this one a solid 8 out of 10. I highly recommend it. And depending on what monitors may or may not launch for the rest of the year, it might end up even receiving my Best Gaming Monitor of 2025 award, so stay tuned to see what that monitor is in the coming months. For everything else display related, make sure to get subscribed here on The Display Guy.